Well, I was hoping to see all of you here face to face, but this is the next best thing. So today I'd like to talk about self. Usually we present it in two parts, like big self and small self. But in fact, self is not really divided except in our minds, which discriminate and like to dissect and study. So today I want to talk about self as one mind and how we can work with that in our usual lives. For example, why do we experience one mind as two separate parts? Why do we ignore the greater part and claim the small self as our whole identity? We act like others are strangers when we meet, and this is the usual way of thinking. For example, among many people we meet in an ordinary day, we believe we only meet strangers or someone very familiar, like a friend or a spouse. In our dual mind, we only meet intelligent people, ignorant people, people worthy of honor, or people unworthy of even our interest. But they're all strangers, really, familiar and not familiar, because we don't recognize them when we meet. So we never act fully appropriately with anyone we meet. We're always minus enough attention or information to be able to respond to them in the right way. We're unable to nourish their spirit in daily honest communication. So we ignore them except in a very superficial way because we only talk to them self to self. In a sense, that's like talking to a ghost, someone who seems to be there but unacknowledged. We're ignorant of their true being, and we seldom talk real person to real person. In other words, authentic being on both sides is ignored. It might help to consider every person we meet as though they were like a flowing stream. The stream always looks the same, but the water is changing. If we could see the life flow of being inside, perhaps we'd understand them better. Perhaps we'd understand our relationship to them better, and perhaps we'd even understand ourselves better. We don't have to ignore the self as we think of it, but we can't talk only to a person superficially and expect genuine communication to happen. It's like only partially feeding each other and partially starving each other spiritually. We're always hungry for something more. So think of it another way. Everyone you meet is either someone you know as you or don't know as you. In other words, it's all you, familiar or not. If you meet an angry person, you won't be happy to meet them, but you're meeting you as you don't recognize yourself, because the anger is still inside you, waiting to come to the surface and be embraced or known by you. You are seeing past angry karma rising. I use the negative form here because usually we welcome a positive version of us unless we're envious of them or resent their success or good luck or good fortune. But that would be a waste of a good positive. The good news is that everyone you meet is a chance to know yourself more completely than before. The bad news is that each person must be welcomed inside and become a known part of yourself again. In other words, it's a lot of work. It's kind of like living the same experience that set anger in motion in the first place again. Now you have foresight and are not totally submerged in it. And only your ignorance of the real person who is also present obstructs you from acting completely in a proper way. Experience eventually enriches your confidence, and you have the gift of knowing how to deal with this angry past karma better than before. So your ground becomes more stable when you acknowledge and receive into your interior another part of yourself. What happens when you accept on faith that everyone you meet is a chance to learn and grow? Even those whom you think you already know. The barrier between interior and exterior dissolves and opens. The exterior begins to work with you to help you. So you must act on faith to move your life in a healthy direction by accepting whomever you meet as your responsibility, understood or not. This actualizes the promise in the ceremony when we say, "All my ancient ignorant karma, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, I now fully avow." That is, I take full responsibility for my ignorant behavior, past, present, and future. The greatest wealth of your life is in your interior, and your interior is your exterior. By not knowing the intimacy of inside, outside, you have most of your greatest spiritual wealth lying fallow, as it were. Like a garden that eventually must feed you, your hands have to get dirty in the soil and watering and feeding of your real life. That's why enlightenment must be a spiritual experience for everyone as well as you. That's why we chant, "Beings are numberless, I vow to save them." It's a very practical course of action. To turn your back on others is to turn your back on yourself. To dislike others is to dislike yourself. To love and care for others is to love and care for yourself. I have a suggestion for you. If you want the exterior to relate to you better, make an effort to curtail your talking, except for giving real information or real communication. If you talk for entertainment, or because silence makes you uncomfortable, or you want to express your emotions, or respond to provocation, then your world will have no communication with you, so you make your way in the dark. Emotions are not helpful to effervesce like bubbles with thoughts, but to give expression to one mind, that is, big self, small self as one. If you can silence your thoughts, at least make them take a back seat, the whole world of being outside will begin to talk to you with useful, true information. Then you can have a real give and take with your big self, and also enjoy the personal coloring of your small self at work, that is. One mind in either silent or colorful communication, and you able to speak from the heart. Thank you. That's it. Oh, Peter, come on over. Here. Are there any questions?
Or comments?
Or comments? Come closer. We get rid of that mute sign up there. Because it just disappears.
I just see this disappear, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, look at that, fantastic.
Well, does anyone have any questions? Everyone's quite happy with their exterior as it is.
So does that mean we all wrote what you just said?
We all what?
We all wrote what you just said.
No, I sat here and talked it, but I don't know who wrote it. Could have been any one of you.
Matt?
Yeah, for years, I think I got ego and small self confused. I understood them as being the same, when taught through the Dharma, and I'm beginning to get a sense that they're not. That small self perhaps is in reference more to personality than to self-centeredness. Is that accurate, inaccurate?
Actually, Matt, what I think is that the small self is actually a creation of the big self. It's how we put together everything in our thoughts and mind when we first looked around at the world and we thought ourselves were this or that. I'm good, I'm not good, I'm able to deal with things, I'm not able to deal with things. Whatever entered our mind came up, and we left it that way. We created ourselves out of our emotions and our thoughts, but we had insufficient evidence with our minds, so we created in ignorance. And so the self is still ourselves as we see ourselves and as we live ourselves in the small world we live in. But we inherit a much greater world if we go out of that small self and go back to who we are, the creator of our small self.
So is there a distinction then between the states that the words ego and small self refer to?
We use the word ego a lot because it really does describe the meaning of self, which is very self-defensive, self-aggrandizing, well, I'm trying to think of everything, but everything that protects as we think of ourselves. We tend to think that's ego because it actually describes the way ego is described, which is always taking care of itself. But I think the small self is actually more than the ego. I think the small self is truly the coloring of who we are really. But we used it in an ignorant way because we just didn't understand the world we were living in enough. So we created it by our thinking and our emotions, and then we started getting ideas about the world, and we started creating our small self even from our concepts of the rest of the world. That is, we were separate, and either we're at the mercy of the world, or we're responsible for the world, or someone is out to get us. Whatever it was that tied us up to samsara is the colorfulness of who we are, and it's always changing. It's never the same because we change all the time. So one day we're this way and the next day we're that way. One day we're very outgoing and sociable and sunny, and the next day we're morose and it's just, we're different all the time. We really are like a stream that's always flowing inside, and we don't give recognition to that because we don't have enough information again. And from inside, because that's where it all resides.
Matt, let me also answer your first question about the personality. And actually, both, it's very hard to define this because it's the small self can be seen from two perspectives. One is the perspective of that Jane was talking about, and that would fit. Just you being you is not a problem. But when we talk about the small self from the point of view, from an earlier point of view in the practice, which of course we're all of us kind of have beginner's mind, and so we're all early here, and that's the one that causes us trouble. They're both small self, but seen from different perspective. When you no longer have a self that is, self-satisfied, thinking that you're self-sufficient, self-aggrandizement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That small self is something that we work with in our practice. That's maybe the whole point of view of our practice is to work with this until this aspect of ourself, of our small self, no longer has such control over us and no longer has our belief. And when that happens, we still have a self, but it's not a self that has all those problems to the extent because we no longer believe in it. We just put that aside and say, oh, okay. But we don't, we usually we believe it. When someone injures us, we think injures us, you know, that's not your color or your personality. That's the small self from that aspect of the small self, of the self. But definitely it's all one self. And seeing it from one perspective of that small self is our color. It's still us, but it's us without all the impediments that we have that are endlessly plaguing. We as we study more and more do we understand that how much they come in the way, get in the way, and how much we have to do everything that we can. We can't get rid of it, but we can learn how to accept it with our own big mind, not think that our small mind is our big mind.
So let me add further to that. The more we surrender this small idea of ourself to this bigger being who we actually are, the less the problems we meet and the more the outside world will actually work with us, will begin to help us.
Okay, Sandy's first and then Mike. Sandy? Oh, I guess your hand up.
Yeah. Hi.
Nice.
So it sounds, or it seems to me that you're saying that by meditating, we come to see that the thoughts that we rely on every day, and those that are like causing us pain, are more delusional than real.
Yeah.
And as we can recognize the delusion and let that go, because now we've become aware of it, uh, that that will be what takes us away from living a miserable life to that where we can recognize that the life we've been living was all a fantasy in some ways because it wasn't based on reality. As-
Probably a lot of what you just said is true, Sandy, because we, as long as we have insufficient evidence of our own ignorance and how we can change, which is to acknowledge the outside world is actually us and where our true spiritual wealth is lying. And everybody that we meet that wealth in some form. If we meet an angry person, we have something inside that person that we have to retrieve and recognize that we threw away at one time. That's just angry karma coming back to our life. So when we recognize what an intimate relationship we actually have with the outside world, then we're starting to meet our big self really.
yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can we say, I guess in modern terms, that the small self is always the victim?
Yeah, feels like it usually. Yeah, the big self doesn't. There's not such a thought because the big self understands is both victim and perpetrator. It's the one that causes the harm, and it's the one that receives the harm because it's all the same bubble, as it were, the same form. So if we harm somebody, we're harming us. And if we hate the person we're meeting, we're actually hating a part of ourselves we're not aware of, but it's there. And when we love somebody, we're also finding out that we love somebody. We love this part of ourselves. So if you care for, say, a very drunken person who bumps around the street and you treat him very decently, you're treating yourself in your confusion you're treating yourself well. So it doesn't matter. It's not just a case of you trying to make yourself feel better. It's the fact of knowing that you have to unite everything inside and outside in order to understand what enlightenment is. You can't have it for yourself, as it were. You can only have it because it's out there. It's everywhere. It's not just one person striving for some perfect state. It's bringing the whole world into fruition of some kind by treating everything right.
So can I want to see if I get this right, because we live in the real world, we suppose, our context of like what we've invented and reflect out into this real world, this whole environment, that really the environment is us. And the whole thing, that's why context, where you are, right where you are, wherever you are, is really paramount to who we are at that moment. We
Yes, so.
change all the time.
Yeah, I think if it's like when you meet people, you have to be really flexible, because the same person you met, say, 2 hours ago, may show up with a whole different attitude. And you have to have the flexibility to move with that, and not only to move with it, but to gain from it and to have them gain from it. In other words, by treating it properly, you are giving as well as receiving. So you're allowing a person to find their fruition at the same time as you're preventing yourself from falling into confused ideas.
So, but we have other external things that happen, like whether we have good days, we have cloudy days, like today, we have storms, and we have global warming.
Yeah,
So I guess I'm causing global warming, as I guess everybody is.
I
We
think
could look at it that way too, right?
I don't know what global warming is, but I have a feeling that probably we just have the circumstances and the karma that we live in, and the karma was ours to begin with. In some way, we've created and brought it to blossoming form in our own way, in the same way that we bring up the angry person because we didn't deal with that properly at some time in the past. So we deal with everything that we meet, but we have certain basic circumstances that we cannot do anything about. And one of them is like if a meteor comes to the earth or something, there's some things you just can't handle. But you can deal with your everyday person to person to person life and deal with that one. And I think when we do that, we actually deal with the rest of the world as well.
Big job.
I think that everybody, if they want to not waste their whole life, has to take care of their whole world in some way. And it doesn't mean to do it in the ways that we think is engaged, but really take care of the exact whole world that you sit in all the time and that you walk in. And if you treat that completely right, it will branch out like ripples in a pond. That's what
I discovered, I think today I came on the understanding that I really, since you started talking, that I really have a circus inside me, because it seems like everything around me is completely changeable, impossible, and there's all these different energies that I have and characters I seem to be able to become out in the real world and change, and how the environment comes to me. It's a big job. I think you'll work on this.
It truly is a big job, and it's but ask yourself, why do teachers who have been teaching for very long times, like our teachers in Japan and even Suzuki Roshi, you didn't teach that long, why were they so joyful inside? And that was the one thing I've always noticed about teachers who have been practicing a long time, is that joyful spirit is always there. If it's such a terrible job, perhaps we're going about it wrong.
Yeah, you're right, because I've kind of settled down and just said, well, it's a circus, and I'm just going to enjoy the show.
There you go. See, that's the thing, is you can enjoy your life, actually. You can enjoy everything that comes up.
Yeah.
And you can enjoy the different meetings, because it's like the whole world is in your house. You know, it may be 5 people, but the whole world is also present.
It
And
goes
so-
a lot better if you just relax and you know, watch the fire breather burn your house down.
No, you gotta fight for your house. You can't do anything. You can't do nothing. You have to. The effort is there, but it's not like trying to get something or trying to achieve something kind
It's
of
just
effort.
To
It's-
find,
it's just-
to find this peace with whatever is going on. It seems to be the trials of the era.
That's
The
right.
real trial is trying to react or not react. The real trial is giving all at every time, emptying out the whole being, because you are actually like a cornucopia and it's all there and it will just keep coming. You have that ability. You have that inside never ending quality of giving. But if we are working from the small self, we think we have an infinite, finite amount. I have to give this much here, this much here. But from your big mind, there's no end. There's no limitation. There's just giving and giving as much as you need. And if we have that attitude when we're with people and we're just always open and let them have it all, we'll help everybody we meet in some way. Whether they acknowledge it or not, they may walk away from us and say, "What an idiot," you know. But it doesn't matter. You've done your job. You pulled the weeds up. Sandy.
No.
Oh,
Oh.
Rachel,
sorry.
Rachel.
But I do have my hand up.
Oh, okay, Sandy. Can you just one moment, Rachel?
What is language in this context? Words are always concepts, and when you refer to you're saying it, but you don't know who wrote it, is language somewhat similar? That sort of ineluctable mix of small self, big self, because you think you know what you're going to say, but when we speak, I don't think anyone says, "How did I end up saying that?" You know, even though you think you know what you're going to say. I mean, is it that same education between the small
actually-
self?
You know, I've actually heard people say after they said something, "Did I really say that?" I don't think they meant it as a compliment. You know, they said something out loud they never intended to say, for example. No, I think language is one of our powers, one of our real powers, like our emotions are. And we misuse them terribly all the time because we use it only in the service of a small thinking mind. So if we get to the point where we're careful with our words and careful with how we use them and how we communicate, and we only speak when we have really something to say, then our words will take on a lot of power with people. And I don't mean power in a sense of able to manipulate. I mean power of communication, what you're saying, what you truly want to say. And when you speak from your big self or your full self, rather than from a small part of yourself, then you can really express a lot, a whole lot from your being. You can not only express, you can give through your words.
Thank you.
I think, you know, when Tibetans do the mantra type work, and my teacher in Japan was Shingon, and she also did a lot of chanting. I think she was trying to tell us about that once when she said to us one time, "Don't just throw out angry words at people, you can actually harm people with your words." So I think that's what she was expressing at that time, you know. So the idea is to treasure everything about ourself, body, speech, and mind, you know, as if it was a weapon. You don't have any idea what you're doing when you're throwing it around at people with words, throwing around your actions without thought, you know, getting mad and just dumping emotions out into the world. We have no idea the harm we cause with things like that. So we learn to be very careful with speech and mind so that when we do use it, it has real effect of communication, true communication.
Now,
Sandy.
yeah.
Sandy.
I was just saying hi to Howard. He was coming in. You had mentioned victimization, where one treats oneself like a victim.
Yeah.
And boy, I have had some friends where I've been able to just to see it more and more. The more I practiced, the more I could see how they were believing that they were victims, and that it was always woe me this, woe me that. And they were absolutely creating a jail for themselves, that they were victims and they should be here, and they're suffering so badly. And it was like it's like a cycle they couldn't get out of. And it's like poison.
It's like poison.
Yeah, the feeling of victimization, because you make your own jail and you trap yourself in it.
Yes.
And yeah, and you need to be able to see what you're doing. And it's very difficult if you don't practice, or if you don't get
That's
some kind of psychological help. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, if your psychological help in this case is sitting on the cushion,
that's right
because when
for
you
us.
feel like a victim in any way, then the first thing to tell you is to look inside, because something is off, something is unbalanced, and so
Right.
you have to figure out where the real thorn is sticking.
Yeah, and it you can see how much they believe their delusions.
Yeah.
Because it becomes so prominent in their life. That yeah, we have to be lucky that we do have a cushion.
Yes, I
life.
think that's very true. We're very lucky we have a cushion.
Yeah, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone?
How do we deal with people who are victimizing themselves, like what Sandy just described?
You can't do anything for somebody who doesn't see it themselves, because someone who doesn't recognize their own problem is not going to hear any advice about it either. So I think there's nothing you can do except live your life in a way which does not have that quality in it. Or you can look at it and realize that maybe there's somewhere inside you, there is that feeling hiding, and you can just look for it when you're sitting. But I think outwardly you can't really do anything unless they ask.
But you also have to be careful. Not you, June, but in general, you have to be careful not to be made a victim of by someone who is being victimized by themselves. That's a little hard to.
Oh,
I didn't quite-
totally. I totally know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was asking, like, how do we protect ourselves from that type of people?
You don't have to protect yourself, June, is what I'm saying. Is that person that you think is being victimized is another part of yourself. And if you want to really work with it, don't take it seriously when it kind of comes towards you. But you can't offer advice in such a situation. All you can do is live your life in a way that does not show that quality, and look for it in yourself.
Then you'll only feel empathy for the suffering of that person who's causing suffering for themselves without knowing that they're doing it.
Definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sandy, is your hand up again?
You're talking to yourself there. Your speaker's not on. Your mic's off, Sandy.
What June had said and what you had just said about, it really means to me that I have to own it. In
Yeah.
other words, when I come up with these feelings of, possible being a victim, or somebody did something to me, I have to really look at that and own it. That it's
Right, but that's
part
really
of me.
hard to do.
Yeah, but it's it might be hard, but I think it's also the longer you practice, the more you're able to see yourself and see these things come up for yourself, and to catch yourself and realize, I'm not going to fall in this trap of delusion. I'm not truly a victim. I'm just who I am, whoever that might be, and just go on from there and accept it. And all the stuff that comes up, we need our language, but our language also is two-sided. It causes, it allows us to create delusion and duality.
Yeah, but that's what we study when we let thoughts go in Zazen, is saying, well, if I let those thoughts, which are saying this and that, go, then what else is there?
Mm-hmm.
It's there when those thoughts aren't there.
Right. And it's, for a lot of people, that's very scary. They're afraid.
I don't have the exact quote, but Dugan said something like, someone who is enlightened is someone who understands delusions completely.
That makes sense.
So our practice is those delusions.
Right. And to realize that the mind is always going to try to make them, but
Yeah.
we can recognize them for what they are.
Oh, there it goes again. So he's, oh my
That's
goodness,
right.
there it goes.
There it goes again. Yeah.
Is it okay that we feel fortunate to have the cushion?
I think so. I think it's true that we have the cushion and we have a means to take our life in our own hands, even for 40 minutes or 30 minutes. Yeah, I think we're very fortunate because some people may have to go to a counselor or somebody to actually just look inside. And you have the opportunity to just come into a Zendo and sit and study your thoughts and just watch the things. And you have that time to do it, whether it's here in the Zendo or at your home. You have that time and you make that time to really study body, speech, and mind every time you sit down. You have a chance to create a healthy template in your life for action.
Yeah. So I do really feel fortunate that I found the practice and I am practicing, because I can see that some people in my life doesn't really have that, right? They don't really have that in their lives, and I can see their delusions, but I'm also at the same time trying to see if there is any delusion that I'm not seeing in that process of seeing their delusion. So I'm always studying myself and they'll never end. But at the same time, I kind of felt like what Peter was saying, like, I can see, I feel really like bad for them for not being able to see that they are victimizing themselves and they're just kind of creating this, cycle of suffering for themselves. I can see that, but I'll never point that out to them because I know that they're not going to listen, right? It's not going to help them. I know that for sure. So all I do is just try to be nice to them, right? And just whenever they say something that I don't like, I just don't express it and just kind of like, just let that go. But at the same time, I was kind of wondering, like, me feeling fortunate about being able to see this, like, am I just is this like an egoic thing?
It's not an egoic thing if you use it to study yourself. If you use it to feel sorry for them or to feel that you are sorry you can't help them, I think that that's a wasted feeling. And that the feeling of looking at another person's suffering and understanding that you're both in the same boat is a much more healthy way to look at it and to rid yourself of it. And when you rid yourself of it, perhaps you'll help them just by doing that for yourself.
What am I getting rid of?
Your own qualities that allow you to see that suffering in someone else. You can't see a suffering person being a victim if you don't feel that way yourself first. So when you see that someone else, you look inside to see where does that come from.
Yeah, I think that when I understand someone's suffering, I know that I've already felt that way in the past, so I can see that. but I
right.
really try not to repeat that in my life, right?
Yeah,
And
but that's, seeing it in someone else is a way to open your own compassion also. It's the way that you can relate to them in a way that might affect them in some time in the future, even if they don't see it now. But finally, locating it in yourself is the real freedom in you.
Yeah, it's very hard to, just say, say to yourself things like that. But like we've been saying with respect to another person, when of course it does affect us, and so that's what we deal with. It does prompt our delusion, and at that time, then we have to recognize that.
right,
So it's going on at the same time as we're, you know, feeling for them at the same time, feeling for yourself. This is not quite right because if you do have that kind of feeling yourself, but you're also being hurt by yourself, and you may be occasionally hurt by yourself within that situation, and that's something you deal with by not taking it seriously.
thank
Or
you. Mhm. Yeah,
we
What are you
so
gonna say?
we read a quote last night in a reading you were doing in the book club from Suzuki Roshi, and I can't remember how it goes exactly. Remember what?
I don't remember the quote.
Well, it was the exact first part. You remember the quote? Yeah,
I
please.
think it was renunciation is not what you get, is not what you give up, but understanding if everything will leave something.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what it was.
Okay,
He
that's it.
said renunciation is not giving up things, but recognizing that everything will leave and letting it go, letting it go
Yeah.
when it's time to go.
Yeah.
Something like that. What's that got to do?
What's that got to
Yeah.
What's love got to do with it?
That's a good one.
Yeah, Matt.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
Matt's first.
sorry.
Yeah, we had a guest teacher whose name I'm blanking out on. If you can remind me, please. He talked about three different types of compassion.
That was Reb Anderson.
Reb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Reb.
Thanks. And it sounds like what you're referring to with regards to feeling compassion for someone without allowing it to drain you, without feeling the pain of it yourself, sounds like what he referred to as the great compassion. Would you say that that's accurate? Do you recall the distinctions that he made?
Somewhat, yeah.
No, actually, I don't.
Well, in reference, as an example that I recall for the great compassion, he gave going to a hospital and sitting with someone who is extremely sick, and that person being more willing to have, for example, a Buddhist priest be with them than necessarily a family member who has an expectation, a hope that they're constantly expressing that the person feel better than they are, and that seems to put a burden on the person who is ill, who doesn't want to be exposed to that person's desires, but that the priest goes in without those expectations and without the articulating them, and simply goes in because of inclination. The inclination is there to be compassionate, but it's not a kind of compassion that drains one, but I guess is in what Jane was talking about, perhaps the cornucopia that I may be confusing all sorts of different things, but maybe you can clarify it.
I think, Matt, that I wouldn't divide compassion into any amount of small or great. I think compassion comes when it rises in you. There's no differentiation in whether you give a lot or a little. It just comes out, and you give. It's part of your being, but it's the part of your being which is really cares about other beings. So it just, whether it's someone sick in a hospital or someone you meet on the street that needs help, or it's someone that you just meet who's in a grouchy frame of mind, and you just smile and let it pass. And it's compassion is just compassion, whatever kind it is. And there probably are means of practice like that, but I think maybe compassion is just the deepest part of you coming out and giving some of yourself to someone else. That's what I think of it as.
But that it seems like that doesn't have to, the giving that part of yourself doesn't necessarily have to take from yourself.
It's not taking, because it's always replenished. There's no emptying, as it were.
Yeah. Thank you.
But I don't recommend people to run around and try to give themselves everywhere. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about a situation that is really called for. But anyway, does anyone have any more questions? Sandy?
I don't remember what I was going to say. So
Don't worry about it then.
I'm not. Oh,
Let me.
your talk. Oh, can I did remember something. Your talk has brought up a saying, there for the grace of God go I.
I cringe when I hear that.
Yeah. Why?
I think,
Oh,
well, because forget the grace of God, just there go I is enough.
yeah. Yeah, that's true. That part
Yeah,
doesn't
but for the
really
grace,
relate
I
to
mean,
me.
That's denying the reality.
Oh,
It's just there go I.
oh. Well, I mean,
The grace of God, implies that you're very lucky and they aren't, but actually you
I see.
are.
Yeah, but there go I is, to me, is like the eye of compassion. You're seeing their suffering within yourself, and it, you you relate to it because you too are human. You too have suffered in the past, and you relate to them because of that. So it's part of you that's relating to them, that is like a mirror, because you're seeing yourself, so you can have compassion, and
Okay,
that's
if
what
you see it
rises
that
up.
If you
Yeah.
see it that way, that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
And Virginia?
Virginia?
Yes, I wanted to give a great big thank you to the people who came to the Zendo today and did the work.
That would be Arvin
And
and Mark.
I wish I could have joined you. Anyhow, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you, Virginia. That's
Yeah.
Thank you, Arvin, and thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
We really appreciate
Yeah,
you being.
we certainly, I mean, I can understand, everyone's circumstances are different. And a lot of you live, very, very far away. But if you can possibly come to the Zendo instead of being online, it's, it would be helpful, because if we have new people coming and they see four of us,
Take it.
they're going to say, oh, this is not a real place. So we need, I know it's not, anyway, if you can come, please come, because you'll help others ultimately, not just Peter and Jane who would like to see you, At least Peter, anyway, I can say.
Oh,
Jay says, don't talk for me. So.
But you do anyway. No, we of course would be really happy to see people come in and fill up the chairs and the cushions and space,
Yeah,
just to see you milling around and have a cup of tea with us. We really miss the bodies. Please come in when you can.
yeah, we really have to begin rebuilding if we want to keep this part of it. I mean, we do have a real Zendo together on Zoom, but it looks like someone's outside. Mark's going to the door.
That's a big dog running around.
Oh, I go. I'll take care of that. Just a minute.
That's the next.
I'd
door
call my
neighbor.
neighbor.
That's our next door
Yeah,
neighbor's dog.
I'll call neighbor. Anyway,
he can leap
so,
the fence, even the
yeah.
7-foot fence.
yeah, if you can, please come.
Yeah.
But if you can't, you can't. That's all.
But thank you for being here today,
Yeah.
and thank you for your good questions.
Yeah.